Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order and would ask firstly for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any contrary? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 5th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry, and it is with great pleasure that I get to read a slightly modified version of the opening remarks that I've been required to read for some time in light of the relaxation of COVID rules. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272 and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings. As the province moves into phase 3 of their opening plan, members of the public, as is obvious tonight, are now permitted to attend council meetings in person. Question period has now been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, the chair will call up those who have signed to the podium to address council. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, we have none.
That's correct, Your Worship.
A motion for approval of the agenda. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Motion for the minutes, adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Motion carries. I have a bit of a mayor's report tonight, a number of items to talk about. The first is a reminder that I would say the most important project the city has underway is entering its second phase, and that's Reimagine Nanaimo. Last summer and during the fall, the first phase of Reimagine Nanaimo, citizens shared many ideas for Nanaimo's future. The second phase of the project is all about exploring options. The next 25 years will bring many changes to our city. What big decisions should Nanaimo make as we grow from 100,000 today to a probable future of 140,000 residents? So phase 2 was launched on June the 28th. Have your say by filling out a feedback form and signing up for a workshop. And phase 2 will remain open until September 20th, 2021. As I mentioned earlier, with respect to how we conduct meetings, obviously there are also changes to city recreation facilities to open following the BC Restart Plan. On June 29th, the province confirmed that Phase 3 of their Restart Plan would begin on July the 1st. As of July 1st, mask use for indoor activities is not required but encouraged. All indoor fitness classes allowed to run with normal capacity. Weight rooms operate with gradual increase to normal capacity with no physical distancing requirements. Pre-registration, however, is still required until September 7th. Indoor spectators of 50 people or 50% capacity, whichever is greater, is permitted. Outdoor spectators of 5,000 or 50% of capacity, whichever is greater, is permitted. All pre-registered sessions, swimming, skating, gymnasium sports have increased capacity. Pre-registration required for these until September 7th, and new communicable disease guidelines will be in place. As of July 12th, Oliver Woods Community Centre, Bowen Complex, Nanaimo Ice Centre, and Nanaimo Aquatic Centre will be open to the public for registration, washrooms, and/or water fountains. As of August 18th, Beban Pool Lobby will open for the fall 2021 registration. As of September 1st to 15th, Beban Pool will be undergoing a major electrical upgrade, so the social centre will not be open. However, the pool lobby and registration will be open. As of September 7th, pre-registration for swimming, skating, gymnasium sports, and pottery will no longer be required, and please register at the facility prior to your session. And as of October 4th, Beban Pool and Weight Room will reopen. Given the dramatic changes in our weather, a ban is now fully in place on open fires within Nanaimo city limits. Following a provincial order, the city has placed a ban on all open fires. These include sky lanterns, tiki torches, fireworks, firecrackers, chimeneas, incinerators, burning barrels, burning cages, and binary exploding targets used for target practice, and any stove or portable campfire device that have not been CSA or ULC approved also are not permitted. And failure to adhere to these bans and restrictions can lead to serious penalties. I think all of us are conscious of what happened in the village of Lytton, and I want to state that the City of Nanaimo Emergency Support Services volunteers have been called upon by Emergency Management BC to support residents who have evacuated from Lytton and other areas of the interior. They will be volunteering there. ESS volunteers will provide a virtual telepod service and assist with evacuee registration while connecting them to sources of information and resources. And the team has been called upon several times over the years to support other communities and are stepping up once again. Our hearts here in Nanaimo go out to the people of Lytton. I cannot think of anything more devastating than to see literally 90% of your community destroyed. Lytton, as many of you know, has been an historic village site for Indigenous peoples in this province for thousands of years. It was a meeting and gathering place. Since contact, it has had a significant colonial history and has been an important part of this province's legacy. And finally, I want to talk about something that is rather unpleasant. It would appear that on Saturday morning early, the Rainbow Crosswalk on Commercial Street was vandalized. The police are seeking assistance in identifying the individual. They do have pictures. But this kind of desecration of something that is meant to make people welcome in our community is simply not acceptable. This is 2021. And I would like to think that this is an isolated incident by an individual who clearly needs some guidance and assistance. It appears to be an adult male, and I would hope that we will not see this kind of behavior again. The city, of course, will be repainting the crosswalk, and that will take place tomorrow. In addition, there was further vandalism done at an art site in the community over on Wharf Street. And again, this does not reflect Nanaimo, it does not reflect the values of this council, and it does not reflect the values of this community. That is my report. We have nothing to rise and report from the in-camera meeting, Ms. Gurry. We have no presentations. Committee minutes are just for receipt, no motion required. We have no consent items. But we do have delegations unrelated to agenda items, and that's Randy Nyquist and Wendy Hall, Community Living British Columbia Community Council. Yep, please. Step forward to the mic. You will have 5 minutes. There should be a little light there that will go on when you have a minute left, and I will certainly announce it to you. If you could state your names for the record and welcome to council. I won't press the start until you're ready to go.
One.
Okay, we're ready.
It's a very welcoming place here.
Okay, good.
Please.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Randy Nyquist. I'm the Practice and Service Advisor with Community Living BC here in Nanaimo. We came here tonight to ask of consideration for the population that we support in Nanaimo and surrounding area. With much development throughout the city in apartments and condos and things, we would like to be considered, our sector to be considered as part of the affordable housing. Currently, what we're seeing happening is that there are sections being accounted for seniors and homeless population, which we do cross into. However, that is not strictly, it's not strictly our population as a whole, and it only represents a very tiny piece of the people that we support. We really feel strongly with allowing people with diverse abilities to have the opportunity to live independently in our community and not have to continue to live with their families and or staff.
Okay, thanks.
Please.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Mayor for his quick response. We bumped into each other at 7-Eleven, and I just okay, we'll take this opportunity. So I appreciate that, and thank you all for letting us come today and talk about affordable housing for people with diverse abilities. My name is Wendy Hall. I'm a parent of 4 children. 3 out of 4 have a diverse ability, and I'm the chair of the Central Island Community Council with CLBC. The video I would like everyone to look at is by Inclusion BC, and we're totally separate, and it's called Key to Home. We do not have time today to show it, as it takes most of my talking time, and I like to talk. I encourage each and every one of you to Google it and watch. We received an email from Karen Cronstel, I think that's her name, that says David Stewart is doing a policy review for adaptable and accessible housing. The Community Council would, with CLBC, would very much like to be included as a stakeholder in this process. There are many housing projects being built in Nanaimo. It would be great to see a portion of these buildings being reserved for people with diverse abilities, with lower rent. I know you clarified on that, but I'm still going to talk about it. I'm not sure, but something to look at would be BC Housing and their funding opportunities for housing partners. How can we assure that new buildings have space for people with diverse ability? I would also like to invite a council member to the Community Council meeting in the fall. I'm thinking maybe September. That comes just prior to October is Community Living Month, to talk about what the city is doing to meet the needs of the population we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have
I have 1 minute, 33 seconds left.
Yes, you do.
I did it.
Well,
Does anybody have any questions or anything?
Well, firstly, let me just say thank you very much. And I was amused when you said you like to talk. I like to talk too, but we have to learn to listen on this side of the table. And I was there buying a paper, not a Slurpee. I want everyone to understand.
Yes, yeah. It was a paper, I guarantee you. Yeah.
Thank you for your support. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you very much. Myself and Councillor Martman chair the Accessibility and Diversity Committee, and we would certainly welcome a visit there. I just also wanted to update you too that at our last meeting, there are motions coming forward where we've approved or recommended that members of the committee as well as staff go to the Universal Design put on by Stop Spinal Cord BC.
Great.
So we are taking some steps, but as the chairs, I'm sure I can speak for Councilor Martman, we'd be more than welcome, or more than willing to go to your meeting. Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, no, sorry, you're not off that easy.
Oh, man. But my 5 minutes is up.
It's like parenting, it's never ending. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and this is an easy question. Thank you, ladies, for coming. Appreciate it. Ms. Hall, you referenced a video at the start of your talk, and I didn't get the name of it.
Oh, it's called Key to Home. And it's produced by Inclusion BC. And if you type in Google, just type in Key to Home and the video will come up.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay?
And if you send an email to Mayor and Council with the reference in it, it will likewise.
Okay, I
probably
did send it to,
Yes.
and I know that, what was her name? Karen Cronsdale spoke about
Yes,
it,
yes.
so,
Good.
yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance tonight.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
The next item is reports, and the first is the official community plan amendment application number OCP 00095 and rezoning application number RA 000457-3679 Shenton Road. And Mr. Lindsay, should we just go straight to Ms. Rowett, or?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I'll hand it over to Ms. Rowett to introduce the next 4 items on your agenda. So I'll turn it over to her now. Thank you.
Ms.
Thank
Rowett,
you.
good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay? Great. As noted, the first agenda item includes 2 concurrent applications submitted by Bill McKay and Associates on behalf of the owner, Western LL Holding Limited. The applicant is requesting an official community plan amendment to designate the subject property from light industrial to corridor, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property from single dwelling residential to residential corridor Core 1. And this would allow a proposed hotel development. As shown on the location plan in attachment C, if we can display that on screen, the property is located in a transitional area of the Wellington neighborhood with commercial and office uses to the west and existing light industrial uses along Shenton Road to the east. Subject properties got a grade change, and I understand the applicant has formed a delegation, and they're going to speak perhaps more to the details, so I won't get into those. But the staff report does include a letter of rationale which highlights a number of constraints affecting the potential use of the property for industrial use, including a 15-meter aquatic setback from the lake. The applicant completed a public engagement event and noted public support for the proposed hotel use. And there are a number of conditions of approval noted in the staff report, including community amenity contribution for future parks and trail improvements in the Diver Lake area, as well as securing road dedication, right-of-way for future lakeside trail, and as well as securing funding for water modeling and possibly off-site upgrades if necessary, and a widened sanitary right-of-way and geotechnical covenant. As noted, the applicant is available to answer questions, and I am here as well if council has questions of staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have a delegation. Bill McKay and Ian Nymeth, no strangers to the podium in this place. And gentlemen, just for the sake of the record, you have 5 minutes, and the light will change when you've got a minute left, or I will tell you, and welcome, and trust you'll enjoy this meeting more than perhaps some others.
Oh, how nice to see smiling faces, smiling, friendly faces up at that table. Mr. Sims says I can't do it in 5 minutes, but I guarantee I will. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this project. This has been a very exciting project, and we think it's a project that's going to work very well on this piece of property. We're calling it the Diver Lake Inn and Suites, and you'll see as we go along why we're including the word suites. So the City of Nanaimo has in place a hotel and motel revitalization bylaw that came out in 2012. The city has and continues to desire to encourage the development and redevelopment of hotels and motels to improve the inventory of quality rooms available to the traveling public. Further, the city wishes to encourage new hotel and motel investment, promote a higher standard of overnight accommodations, and reinforce the city's commitment to the long-term development of the tourism industry in Nanaimo. Nanaimo currently has about 700 clean hotel rooms in 9 properties. Not having enough capacity limits the number of overnight delegates we can accommodate in the city for conferences at the VICC. Since the introduction of the hotel bylaw in 2011, however, while there's been over 800 new rooms proposed, only 45 have been built with this bylaw in place. There's another 175 currently under construction. However, we have to remember that with the loss of the Howard Johnson, the net in new rooms is only 120 new rooms with the 45 on Selby Street and the new hotel. The owners of this property believe that adding approximately 70 new rooms will certainly aid the city in heading toward a goal of greater number of rooms, and it's going to also help because of the market that they're hoping to find their niche in. Will also help in your new sports tourism initiative. They're really looking forward to trying to cater to the family market. The property is an interesting property. When I started doing the research on it, the property has had three distinct OCP designations since 2003. First off, neighborhood. Second, neighborhood with office use alongside 3 other properties adjacent to it. And then in 2008, when the OCP was adopted, it was then redesignated as light industrial, as well as those other properties. In 2012, those properties from the border of this one all the way up to Steve Marshall Ford were changed to corridor. This property was left behind in that process, and so it remained light industrial. It's the owner's request to have the property redesignated from light industrial to corridor in keeping with the properties to the west and the current development. Zoning for 3679 has for many years been R1 residential. The development from 3701 and beyond have changed from R1 residential to mixed-use corridor. The applicant's proposal is to go from current zone of R1 residential to proposed zone Core 1 residential corridor. So the current project known as Divers Lake Inn and Suites is intended to supply 72 new overnight bedrooms within the city. Most rooms will have 1 bedroom, while a small number will have 2-bedroom suites specifically intended for families. The building will be 100% accessible and will have specially designed seats for those who having physical challenges. The building will not have a restaurant, but will feature a breakfast area to be provided to guests. The rate structure is intended to be in the medium price range at the time of completion, and the property will include extensive renaturalizing of the landscaping elements from the 15-meter mark down to the waterline.
1 minute, Mr. McKay.
Thank you very much. And the property will include extensive renaturalizing of the landscaping elements that will tie in with the city's proposed trailway around Divers Lake. The owners specifically would like to see their rather significant contribution to go towards that trailway and that project. Thank you very much. We're here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is probably to staff, and I just wanted some clarification on the slope from Shenton Road down to Divers Lake. I'm assuming the 7 meters refers to the amount of slope as opposed to the distance?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. McKay, if I may. I'm looking at the community amenity contribution that you've agreed to with staff on here, and it's to be put towards pathways around Divers Lake. Not opposed to the concept. I just don't know when we're going to be building pathways around Divers Lake. Would you be opposed to instead having that community amenity contribution go towards our Housing Legacy Fund?
I don't believe I can't speak for the applicants. They've asked that it go towards this project at this particular point in time. because we know that the neighbors that we've spoken to that live in the area desperately want to see that trailway start to proceed sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. I'll have a question for staff now. Can I do it now?
Sorry, you'll have,
I have a question for staff.
please, go ahead.
Thank you. So, same sort of question. Do we have any plans in the way, and will 134,000, I think it is, be able to build the pathways around the lake?
So through your worship, to Councillor Bonner, there have been a number of initiatives over the years to secure rights-of-ways for portions of the trail, and portions of the trail some portions are already constructed. So that is a high priority in this neighborhood. It is also going to be topical through Reimagine, and we do expect that there is going to be conversation specifically about waterfront access, and Diver Lake being one of the specific examples for conversation. So there has been a number of right-of-ways secured, and through this application, one of the proposed conditions would be securing right-of-way, a blanket right-of-way to be determined at a future, more detailed stage in terms of where the alignment would be.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I know we're not here to argue community contributions, but I just wanted to say that I do believe it should go to the Divers Lake area because they are the people that are impacted by it. And that's one way that they can actually get some trails is through that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions to the delegation? Seeing none, gentlemen?
Thank you, Worship and Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move first that official community plan amendment bylaw 2021 number 6500.043 to redesignate 3679 Shenton Road on the future land use plan, map 1, from light industrial to corridor, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
And I would move that official community plan amendment bylaw 2021 number 6500.043 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries.
Your Worship, I would move that a zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.189 to rezone 3679 Shenton Road from single dwelling residential R1 to residential corridor COR1 pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Councillor Thorpe.
I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.189 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries. None opposed.
And finally, Your Worship, I would move that Council direct staff to secure a community amenity contribution, road dedication, public access for a future lakeside trail, water modeling and off-site water system upgrades, widened sanitary sewer right-of-way, and geotechnic covenant prior to adoption of the bylaw, should Council support the rezoning bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item, B, Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 423-5610 Arnhem Terrace. Ms. Rowett.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a development variance permit application in relation to an existing single-family dwelling, a single-family zone property at 5610 Arnhem Terrace. It's located south of Turner Road on the west side of the Island Highway. And as illustrated on attachment D in the staff report, if we can display that on the screen, it shows the site survey. The owner wishes to build a detached carriage home and retain an existing garage. The maximum permitted floor area for accessory buildings is regulated in Part 6 General Regulations of the Zoning Bylaw. In this case, the maximum gross floor area for all accessory buildings on the lot is 90 square meters. An additional 42 square meters may be exempt from the floor area calculation where it is used exclusively for parking purposes and there's no garage or carport within the existing principal dwelling. In this case, the owner has requested a variance to increase that exemption for the garage from 42 to 49 square meters to allow the existing garage to be retained while maximizing the size of the carriage home up to 90 square meters. Part of the rationale is to give additional flexibility in designing an accessible suite. Staff support the variance and statutory notification has taken place. I understand the applicant is present and participating in the meeting, and I'm available also to answer questions from council.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Root before we go to the delegation? We have Robin Bull. Ms. Bull, good evening.
Hello, thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, and you have 5 minutes.
Sorry, this is my first time, so. I'm requesting, as she said, to have the size of my garage allowance increased to allow for an accessible suite to be built on my property. This purpose of the suite is for my parents to move on to my property to age in place, as well as my son currently uses a wheelchair, so that it has to be wheelchair accessible anyways. A lot of careful consideration has been given to the plan to allow it to be accessible, and we really need the entire square footage of the 960 square feet, I believe, in order to make the suite accessible. The garage is in excellent condition, and there's really no reason to tear it down and rebuild it. It would be quite wasteful and unnecessary use of resources and time. And it is used exclusively for parking. Other than right now, it contains building materials for the suite. Do you have any questions for me?
Ms. Bull, I don't see anyone has any questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're getting off easy.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmons moves the recommended motion. We have a seconder in Councillor Brown. I don't see. Councillor Thorpe? No. No discussion. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Bull. Successful evening for you. The next is item C, development permit application number DP 1212 and housing agreement HA 000006-285 Prideaux Street. Ms. Rowett, please.
Thank you, Worship. This concurrent development permit application and housing agreement is for a proposed 4-story, 51-unit supportive housing development at 285 Prideaux Street in the Old City neighborhood. The application was submitted by S2 Architecture Interior Design on behalf of BC Housing. The site is located in a hub of civic services, close proximity to the RCMP building, adjacent to Fire Hall Number 1 that is under reconstruction. The site contains the existing community services building, which is to be demolished, and is also the site. The site is one of the proposed BC Housing projects identified in the Memorandum of Understanding with the City of Nanaimo to provide supportive and affordable housing units at various sites in the city. The proposed modular building is probably best illustrated if you can please display attachment F, the building renderings. And part of the proposal includes a height variance for the building from 12 meters to 16 meters. There are some reductions in landscaping requirements on the east and north side property lines, as well as a reduced setback and landscaping requirement for the garbage enclosure. And also a reduced parking requirement from 10 spaces to 6 spaces. I understand we have a delegation also to speak this application, so I won't go into the details again on the site constraints here that have informed the design. However, I would note that although it's not required, BC Housing did do some community engagement on the design, and the application was also received and supported by the city's design advisory panel. And the staff report, of course, summarizes some of the design revisions that were made to address input from the community and the panel as well. The proposed design meets city's design guidelines, and staff support the variances and recognize that the design is respectful of public view corridor down Fitzwilliam Street in particular. It's also noted that the housing agreement would be to secure the form of tenure for this development. I'm happy to respond to any questions you might have on this project.
Thank you, Ms. Rowett. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I'll be opposing, obviously, with parking, because we heard the same thing from BC Housing when they put in the units for the seniors, that 13 spaces would be enough. We now have a petition before us with well over 70 names because there isn't enough parking. That area has no parking, so I'm totally opposed because I don't think 6 is sufficient. There's going to be much more, there's visitors that come, there's no parking in the area. It may not also, and some, contrary to what they say, is we heard many people do have cars, so.
Councillor, we do have a delegation.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know that.
Sorry. Chad Zyla,
Doesn't show on mine.
sorry. Are we coming in?
afternoon.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Zyla.
Yes, good evening.
I hope you know the rules. 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm not presenting anything this evening. I'm only here to answer questions.
For questions, very good, thank you. Then we'll let Councillor Armstrong go first.
No, I'm finished. I'm just voting against.
Councillor Brown is moving the motion. Councillor Bonner is seconding. Councillor Bonner?
Just for clarification, Your Worship, sorry to interrupt, but you're just moving the variance right now, which is the development permit variances in the bullets 1 through 5.
Yes.
Thank you.
The 5 items listed under yes, and then we'll get to the motions regarding first reading, et cetera. Yes. Clear. Councillor Bonner, you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Mostly a question to the presenter, Chad, who's not presenting, just asking questions. In this particular development, there doesn't seem to be any public art, and I fully understand BC Housing not being able to afford public art on property. But I was wondering if they would be opposed to the city putting some public art on the building. Specifically, I'm looking at the side that faces Fitzwilliam. There's a fairly large wooded area there where the siding is, and it would probably be an ideal place for a mural or something that could be attached to the wall. I guess the concern here would be is that it's a modular build, I believe, and you'd probably want to put that, the parts that hold it on there into the design. So I'm just curious if that's something that's an option, and do we have, the second question would be to staff is, do we have money in our public art reserve to do that?
Ms. Rowett.
Through your worship, I'm not familiar what reserves we have for public art specifically, but we could look into that question if you wish us to follow up.
I guess the question would be to
Mr. Zyla.
Yeah.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I am having an incredibly hard time hearing the questions. I was listening to the council session prior and could hear everything clear, but now that I've been admitted, the voices are incredibly muted.
I'm going to ask, it's Mayor Krogh then, Mr. Zyla, I'm going to ask Councillor Bonner to ask his question again.
Mm-hmm. The question is that right now there's no public art on the building, and I'm asking if you would be opposed to the city paying to have some public art put on the building.
The building was definitely not designed to have public art placed on it. I think this would be a question more for BC Housing than the architect ourselves. But we would definitely be open to any conversation about public art or anything that can improve the streetscape. We believe the building works on its own and doesn't require public arts along the various elevations, but we would be open to discussions about this. I wonder if potentially a sculpture or something might be more appropriate.
Sure. Something.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in full support of the variances, and to Councillor Armstrong, I understand the parking issue, but I think the potential of turning down 51 supportive housing units that is part of a memorandum of understanding that we've signed for the sake of 4 parking spaces would not be in our community's best interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. realize I was not quick on the cue, just as fully in support of this application as well. Glad to see it come together. I'm really appreciative of the efforts of the architect to respond to some of the design advisory panels, because in these projects, budget's limited for a reason. So thank you for those efforts. And I too am in full support of the variances. It always cracks me up that we spend more time making sure that every car has like 100 homes for itself, whether it's garage or parking spaces in the city, but we don't show that same effort and care for citizens. So I will support these 10 times out of 10.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also will be supporting the proposed variances. I do share Councillor Armstrong's concern about parking in our city, and it's an ongoing challenge. But I think in this case, I am persuaded that the variation, or the variance rather, is justifiable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, all those in... Mr. Lindsay, sorry.
Your Worship, can I just add to an earlier question from Councillor Bonner about the public art? So Mr. Harding mentioned to me that in 2021, all of your public art money is currently fully subscribed, but so it would be 2022 before we'd have any capacity to add additional art projects. If this is an area that council would like us to have discussion with BC Housing as the building, as they own the lease, I think a council motion to direct us to enter into those discussions would be appropriate, but would not be in 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Nothing arising. Councillor Bonner?
Question then, if I may. So it wouldn't be for this particular building unless we were putting a sculpture or something in?
Your Worship, I wouldn't want to, at this point, preclude anything. I think, there's other buildings in town where we've gone in and put public art in after the building was constructed. I think the project on Bowen Road, most people are familiar with, and there's public art on the side of that project that was done by NAC. So something could potentially be done here, but if council wants us to pursue and look at those options, then I think a motion would be appropriate.
In that case, Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that...
Just sorry to interrupt, Councillor Bonner, Your Worship.
We're in another one right
there
now.
is a motion on the floor right now, so appropriate after this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Again, all those in favor and those opposed, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship.
After.
Thank you, Worship. And in case I'd like to put forward a motion that council ask staff to enter into conversation with BC Housing regarding placement of public art on the property in 2022.
Do we have a seconder?
Dies a slow death.
Councillor Hemmons to the rescue. Motion seconded. Anything you wish to say further, Councillor Bonner?
Only in that the building is a very nice building. It looks it is great. It's just that we could always use more public art, and there's not a lot in our downtown area. So I know that the fire hall is going in next door, and there's public art on that as well. But even something as little as a statue in the corner or something along those lines, even similar to what we have out at Fifth and Bruce. I think would just add that little bit much more. It's just a little nice thing that makes Nanaimo just look a little bit better, and I think that's why I would do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All those in favor? Councillors Bonner, Brown, Krogh, Hemmons, and Gesselbrock, and those opposed? Councillors Turley, Thorpe, Armstrong, and Martman. Thank you. Motion carries. Sorry? Martman was in favor? In favor?
I am not opposed.
Oh, well, very good. You're added to the majority then. Thank you. Motion carries. The next is rezoning application. Oh, pardon me. We then on to motion respecting the housing agreement bylaw. Councillor Thorpe, acting mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2021 number 7327 to secure unit affordability pass first reading.
Seconded. Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
I will move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2021, number 7327, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
And your worship, I'll move that Housing Agreement Bylaw 2021, number 7327, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries.
And your worship, I'll move that council direct staff to register a covenant on the title of the land to reinforce the terms of the housing agreement.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We are now on to item D, rezoning application number RA 469-2220, 2232, 2238, 2246, 2254, Northfield Road, and 2230 Boxwood Road. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have to excuse myself. I'm in conflict. Probably the reason would be is I live about 13 feet from this property, so. But it'll be wider once the city makes Northfield wider.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. We'll give you a moment to absent yourself. And Ms. Rowett, once again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This application is a joint rezoning application from the Island West Coast Developments and the City of Nanaimo to rezone the subject properties from a variety of zones, including our single-dwelling residential R1 zone, duplex residential R4, medium-density residential R8, and community service 1, CS1, to a mixed-use corridor zone, Core 2, with site-specific maximum gross floor area for a grocery store. And this would be within the context of a mixed residential and commercial development. It is also bordering a major city project, the Midtown Gateway project, which is probably best displayed on attachment C, if we can display that on the screen, on the northern property line. This project, of course, includes the extension of Boxwood Road. My apologies, it would be attachment D, the site context plan, the next one. Thank you. And you can see the site there bounded with Northfield to the south and the new connector on the north side. The applicant, of course, has provided a conceptual site plan of what the development could look like, with the intent of having a major food store, as well as additional retail units on the ground level of multi-level buildings, approximately 180 residential dwelling units, as well as some additional over 1,700 square meters of office floor area. And through, of course, the rezoning application, there are a number of conditions of approval, including securing road dedication requirements of the Northfield frontage, as well as a community amenity contribution, which they have proposed to develop a public plaza to be secured in a size of at least 527 square meters, and with criteria in terms of textured surface, seating, landscaping, public art, and a statutory right-of-way to make that publicly available. I will note that, of course, this is very conceptual at this stage, so it's not intended to be a final design. It has not gone through a detailed design review, so the location or alignment of the public plaza is subject to change, but the intent of what's to be provided will be secured through the rezoning application. I can answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We have a delegation, Patrick Brandreth from Island West Coast Developments, and I assume that's
Your Worship, I believe the delegation is just here to answer any questions, but they can correct me if that's not right.
very good. Mr. Brandreth, just for questions?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Very good. Council have any questions for Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I was just wondering when you had your community meeting.
Sorry, no, don't touch, it's working.
Okay, I was just wondering when you had your meeting with the community, what their concerns were around the density and traffic.
I believe that's for the delegation, so Mr.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We actually didn't really receive too many concerns around around traffic or access. The majority of the concerns came around which catchment the kids were going to fall into as far as school, as far as the school catchments went.
I just see in our report that it said the concerns were regarding density, traffic, and availability of parks, so that's why I asked that question. Thank you.
Any other questions for the delegation? Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is for staff, not the delegation, and it's regarding the community amenity contribution. My understanding of community and amenity contributions to date are that they're an exchange almost for the lift of the land, and they're meant to be benefiting the surrounding community. This community amenity contribution seems to me to be a direct benefit to the developer in that it's enhancing a corner of their development. And given the layout of the proposed development, I can't see neighbors coming to that. So I'm just wondering if you could walk me through how that's an acceptable CAC. Thank you.
Ms. Rowett.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll do my best. Obviously, as you noted, as was noted, the amenity contribution is meant to provide some public benefit, and so the plaza would be intended to be publicly available and accessible, and so there would be right-of-way secured for that, as well as noted some seating, furnishings, public art for the enjoyment of the public to be able to access on site. This corner and even this site really being part of a gateway site into this part of the city also will connect into other networks such as our off-Bowen Bikeway and some of the pedestrian networks that will be developed through adjacent developments to the west. So it's really early stages, but the intention is to build out the vision for the corridor designation on this site. It doesn't have a lot of foot traffic at this time, but the idea would be to slowly create networks over time and giving people a reason to come to the site and have something to enjoy on the site.
Any further questions? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Then I will move that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.187 to rezone the properties at 2220, 2232, 2238, 2246, 2254 Northfield Road, as well as 2230 Boxwood Road from single dwelling residential R1, duplex residential R4, medium density residential R8, and community service 1, CS1, to mixed use corridor COR2, with site-specific maximum gross floor area for a grocery store, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Turley. Any discussion? All those in, I can't see Councillor Martman. I assume no questions. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
And Your Worship, I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw 2021 number 4500.187 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
And I will move that council direct staff to secure road dedication and the community amenity contribution should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Sorry? Councillor Brown. Sorry. Rushing along here.
Not a problem. I won't be supporting this motion, mainly just because I think the community contribution needs further look at. I very much agree with the line of questioning. So overall, to this point, very supportive of the project and seeing the change of use there, and we'll be excited to hear what comes back through the public hearing. However, I do agree with the comments that, or the questioning, but I think the sentiment is that I'm not sure this totally hits the mark with respect to what a community amenity contribution should be. So I would rather see this motion defeated, and that we support the obviously the road dedication, and then a subsequent motion for a revisiting of the community amenity contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I share the same sentiments as Councillor Brown. I won't be supporting this part of the motion.
Thank you. The motion is in front of us. All those in favor? Councillors Armstrong, Hemmons, Krogh, Thorpe, and Turley, and Martman, and those opposed, Councillors Brown and Gesselbrock. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Renter and Landlord Experience Survey. And, oh yes, sorry.
No, here it comes. This way.
Councillor Bonner, I was pushing along. I was going to start without you. I apologize. The next is the Renter and Landlord Experience Survey. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to immediately turn this over to Mr. Stewart, who's been the project lead on this initiative. He's going to walk you through the report, and I'm going to stall long enough for him to get back to his chair. And he's going to walk you through the PowerPoint presentation this evening.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stewart, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bopal Singh.
Yeah.
Your bailiwicks.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, today I'm happy to talk to you about a survey we completed for renters and landlords. And the survey was done between April 21st and May 12th. The rationale for the survey was to help the city understand the needs of renters and landlords, and this was a recommendation of the Affordable Housing Strategy and the Health and Housing Action Plan as well. So I'm just gonna walk you through that. So what I'd like to talk about is some of the highlights, that just some high-level highlights from the survey. You have the complete survey results in your packages as well, if anyone wants to dive deeper, and I'm happy to take questions on that. But for now, we'll just go over some highlights that stood out to us as staff. So we'll talk about the renter survey, the landlord survey, and then we'll introduce some concepts that come out of the affordable housing strategy that relate to the survey results. And one is the family-friendly housing survey, and the other relates to the delegation we heard earlier this evening, and that's to begin an adaptable and accessible housing policy. So in terms of the survey, like I said, we did this as part of the Reimagine project on the Get Involved website. The survey was available from April 21st to May 12th. We also contacted, sorry, I'm hearing my own feedback and it's throwing me off. We contacted 10 rental housing apartments directly. So we did a mail out of 10 various apartments throughout the city. So through that, we heard from 465 eligible responses. We actually had 533 rental responses in total, but of those, only 465 were eligible to fill out the survey as renters. In terms of the landlord and property management survey, we had 394 responses. 358 of those were eligible landlords that were able to fill out the survey. One of the key stats that stood out for all of us in terms of the survey was the amount of income that folks are spending on rent in Nanaimo. So as you can see here, 79% of those that responded spend more than 30% of their household income on rent. For those that don't know, that's significant because the 30% is the threshold that BC Housing, CMHA, rental experts in general use as an affordability calculator. If you're spending more than 30% of your income on rent, your housing is not affordable. So what this tells us is nearly 80% of those respondents do not have affordable housing. This is significantly higher than the 2016 census, which noted 48% spend more than 30% on their rent, which is still higher than the BC average of 43%. We also noted
Mr. Holm, if I could just interrupt. It's been a long day for me and I'm tired, but unless my math is completely off, I read that to mean that nearly 50% of the people who are surveyed are spending between 30 and 50% of their income on rent. You've got 28% of the total, I assume, are spending more than 50%. You've got 79 are spending more than 30. Am I missing something tonight?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try and explain that a little more clearly. So there are two different stats up there, and I was speaking to the first stat so far. So that first stat speaks to 79% of the respondents spend more than 30% of their household income on rent. So in other words, of all the respondents on the survey, nearly 80% of those spend more than 30%. We then dove a little further into that, and we noted that 28% of those folks spend more than 50% of their rent. So we actually asked is, do you spend more than, there was a range in the survey in terms of how much they spend on rent. So we asked folks, do you spend less than 30%? Do you spend between 30 and 50? And do you spend more than 50? So that 28% are the folks that say they spend more than half of their income on rent. Whereas the 79% are folks that spend more than 30% of their household income on rent. I don't know if that's clear as mud or.
28%.
No, I'm looking at the total just so my
that's
thinking
sorry,
is
pardon
here.
me. Yeah.
If the people, if let's round them to 80 and 30.
Yeah.
So we know that 80% spend more than 30%. But of that, I assume, of the survey, 30% of the people are spending more than 50%. So that leaves the rest in between, which I would take to be, I mean, I see, yeah, I know what I'm getting at, but what I'm trying to say is that still leaves a substantial portion of people who are spending between 30 and 50% of their income on rent.
That's correct. Yeah.
It's not quite mathematically correct the way I'm proposing it, but I just want to emphasize for anyone who's listening, it's a pretty shocking statistic.
It absolutely is, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight that. And apologies for the way it was presented there, but I think you have a clear understanding of what that is, and I'm just frantically flipping through to the actual survey here to see.
I think, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Stewart, perhaps if I was to take this survey, would one of the questions be, do you spend more than 30%? And then another question would be, do I spend even more than 50%? And that's how you got those numbers. So I think that that's probably the way that ended up that way.
Yeah, I can break it down for, so the survey itself asks the question, what percentage of household income do you spend on rent? I'm just going to round up here, but 21% spend 0 to 30% on rent. 51% actually spend between 30 to 50% on rent. And that 28% is inclusive of the all respondents, and that's folks that spend more than 50% on the rent. So that's not 28% of 79, that's 28% of the 100 respondents. So just
The total, and that's what I'm getting at, there's a substantial portion of people who are spending between 30 and 50% of their income on rent. I mean, above 50 is shocking enough, but that substantial portion of the renters. In any event, I won't interrupt further, sorry.
No, thank you, and feel free to ask questions as we go here for clarification. So one of the other questions we asked folks was, do they have they experienced difficulty finding rental accommodation? And keep in mind that the folks that are responding to this survey are active renters, so they have eventually found rental accommodation. It doesn't account for the folks that are still struggling to find accommodation. But yet 76% of those noted they have difficulty finding accommodation. We then dove down, and those that responded were asked to identify reasons, and the reasons those numbers don't add up is they could identify more than one reason. Not surprisingly, cost was overwhelmingly the largest response, with nearly all of them, 95% of folks mentioning cost of housing as being a barrier to finding rental. Given our 1% vacancy rate, the second one's probably not surprising to us as well, is lack of available rental. The third one's one that doesn't get talked about a lot, but for those of us who do have pets, it's a real barrier in terms of the rental market, and 67% of the folks that responded mentioned a lack of pet-friendly rentals. And the fourth, we'll talk about more when we get into the adaptable and accessible rental policy, but the number 12 may not seem significant, but if we factor in that not all folks have diverse abilities or accessibility challenges, that's a pretty significant number, and 12% noted that rentals are not suitable to their ability. So maybe some slightly better news after dropping some bombs here already. In terms of satisfaction with rental accommodations, a small majority are happy with the accommodations they have, whereas 42% were not, and we'll go into some of those reasons. So in terms of concerns, we heard size and rental cost were the larger concerns, and again, they were asked to identify all concerns, which is why these numbers will not add up. Condition of rental, relationship of landlord. Location of the rental was surprisingly low, whereas accessibility once again shows up here. So again, that shows that accessibility concerns for rentals do exist in our community. Yes, it's only 8%, but again, we're only talking about a portion of the population that would have these concerns, or where this could apply. So the other thing we did through the survey is we talked to landlords as well, and tried to identify some concerns for property owners and landlords. What we largely heard back from what were in fact landlords, we sent a direct survey links to the various property management companies in town, but what we actually heard back from were the majority of landlords who rent single families, duplexes, and suites, and the numbers here again are not going to add up because many folks own more than one unit, but 59% of the respondents said they rent out a suite, whereas 50% mentioned they rent out either a single-family home and or a duplex. Only 9% were apartment owners or landlords with apartments more than 10, apartments in general. Of those, 3% were more than 10. We asked the landlords some of the challenges they have in terms of keeping tenants, and given again the 1% vacancy rate, it wasn't surprising to hear that only 16% of those landlords do express problems with keeping tenants. Most folks who find rental accommodation tend to want to keep it in a market where we have such a low vacancy rate. The challenges the landlords face, though, how they relate to ending the tenancy. A lot of comments related to the Tenancy Act and the Residential Tenancy Act. We also heard about damage to property and tenants paying rent on time. As council is aware, both BC Housing and the City of Nanaimo do support rental housing first programs. One run through the John Howard comes to mind, where we actually support them in folks in paying their rent on time to the landlords. So we asked some of the landlords if they were interested in supporting tenants that receive rental support. 17% already do that. However, 50%, half, were not interested in supporting tenants that receive rental support. The remaining number are interested in hearing about programs and being part of that. So that's something that hopefully they were provided some information in the survey that they could follow up on, and hopefully that will increase that 17% number if funding becomes available. In terms of finding tenants, 45% have said they experienced difficulty finding tenants. That being said, that's not due to lack of applications. Only 4% really had a concern with lack of applications. Again, with the 1% vacancy, it's certainly not a problem for finding actually receiving applications. For the landlords, it was more screening and finding suitable applications, ones that they felt fit their property. So 39%, as you can see, mentioned unsuitable applications. Separately from that, missing and unsuitable references. 31% too many applications to deal with. And again, pets and families come up here as a barrier. There's no number to that because that actually wasn't an option within the survey, but they came up so often in the comments, and we felt it was significant enough to point out in the infographic. It also makes a nice segue into the next piece here. So through both the renter survey and some previous work, we noted a need for family-friendly rentals. A lack of family-friendly rentals was mentioned in the renter survey by 28% of the renters respondents, which is interesting because only 101 of the respondents noted they have children. So it's a significant portion of those families. 65% of those who had children actually commented that lack of family rentals was sitting there. We noted a need for yard and play space in survey responses, and certainly that's been tied through the comments and just our own knowledge of COVID. For those of us who have families during COVID, it's been a challenge for those who don't have yard space. That's what we're hearing. The affordable housing strategy I mentioned supports 2 and 3 bedroom multifamily dwellings, and and a short-term goal of the affordable housing strategy is to create a family-friendly housing strategy. That is within our work plan, and one of the reasons I'm here today is to introduce council that we will be going through a family-friendly housing policy strategy within the next 2 years.
And just to be clear, the 28% of the surveyed people, they are folks looking for accommodation, but that's an individual, presumably in a family. So in fact, that 28% may represent the 28% of the individuals asked, but they may have 3 or 4 children and a spouse and dogs and cats all behind them. So in fact, in terms of the percentage of people, the numbers of bodies who are looking for family-friendly accommodation, you're talking about a much bigger number than 28% of the total population that needs to rent.
Yeah, and just to clarify even further,
Councillor Armstrong?
I just asked, could you please speak into your mic, because I can't hear you. Thank you.
Apologies. Is that better? Through your worship? Yeah. So yeah, just for clarity there. Yeah, that 28% is all respondents of the survey, and we had 465, I believe I mentioned, survey respondents, or 464. 101 of those were noted they had children. So it also speaks to our definition of family as well, because there are folks that do not have children that mention they have concerns about finding family-friendly rental housing. So I thought that was significant, and maybe causes us to rethink what we think of as family as well. The other piece that I wanted to take this opportunity to speak with council about is, as I mentioned earlier, the accessible and adaptable housing policy. Sorry. So before we get into the weeds on this, just wanted to take an opportunity to speak to the difference between accessible versus adaptable housing. When we're using both words on purpose here, because we want this policy to be as inclusive as possible. So accessible refers to a dwelling that is designed to meet the needs of people of all abilities. So that's simply a housing unit that is accessible for people of all needs. Whereas adaptable is a dwelling unit that's designed to be easily renovated to meet tenants or owners' changing ability needs. So for example, a house that's designed to allow the tenant or the owner to age in place and accommodate needs as they age or change.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The trick is to point it to your mouth. I hate to say
Apologies.
this, like a gun.
Yeah, apologies. Through your worship, is that better, Councillor Armstrong? Yeah. Okay. And do you need me to repeat that last slide, or is that? Yeah. Okay. So adaptable and accessible housing policy, and apologies again for the amount of information on this slide. So through the survey, I noted that 12% of survey respondents had difficulty finding a rental that suited their accessibility needs. That's significant, as I noted earlier, because not everyone that responded to the survey has accessible needs, but a good portion of those that did indicated that was a challenge. 8% were unhappy with the rental due to accessibility challenges. We also heard numerous comments, and some of those are shown on the slide in front of you in red, about barriers to housing due to accessibility challenges. The accessible and adaptable housing policy is a medium-term goal of the affordable housing strategy. It's also supported by the age-friendly plan that was adopted by council about 2 years ago. And as such, we are looking to include it in the 2021 and 2022 work plan. So yeah, just to take a step back from that, that's certainly, we saw some pretty telling comments through the survey responses and followed up with a number of folks by email regarding challenges they're facing. We heard a delegation today regarding that. Actually, two of the delegations spoke to the challenges they had regarding accessibility. So that's something we are looking at, adopting a plan, working with our building inspections department on addressing accessibility in multifamily housing in the city of Nanaimo.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. I'm curious if we've accelerated the family-friendly policy and the accessibility policy based on the data we've collected, or whether those were already in the work plan and this data just reinforces that that work needs to take place.
Yeah, certainly, Your Worship, through Councillor Hemmons. A little bit of both, to be honest. We took the opportunity to piggyback on the Reimagine surveys to do the survey work, which was a goal of the Health and Housing Action Plan as well. And it certainly supported some of the data for these policies. In terms of, I think I mentioned the adaptable and housing policy is a medium-term goal of the affordable housing strategy, which puts it in the range of now and 2 years from now, whereas the family-friendly housing policy is actually an immediate goal. So it's something that should have been started by now anyways. So that certainly hasn't been accelerated. If anything, it's actually delayed by about a year. Whereas the adaptable and housing accessible policy has been accelerated due to council comments and some of the information we heard back on the survey.
Thank you. That's great. I would just hate to collect all of this data from the community and then not really do anything with it, not accelerate any work plans or not push forward. So thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you, Worship. Just a comment. Yeah, it's great having this data. It's quite surprising. Well, not surprising, but it confirms a lot that what we're hearing on the streets about the lack of affordability in the rental market. Also, it was interesting just about the respondents saying for families renting children, the lack of yard space and nearby amenities, and just a prior discussion that we had for Reimagine was the 300 principle about 3 trees that outside of a window, 30% canopy cover in neighborhoods, and then a park 300 meters away. But I think those pocket parks with trees and that are easily accessible in neighborhoods, especially as we start densifying, is going to be quite critical with our planning to make sure that we're on top of that. So, thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I may have missed it in the survey results. Did you ever ask the questions of landlords how many times or how much you have raised your rent in the last 5 years?
Yeah, Your Worship, through the Councillor Bonner, no, that question was not asked in the survey result. That would have been interesting to find out.
Okay, appreciate that. People complain that rents are increasing, and rents don't magically increase because fairies show up in the middle of the night. Someone makes a decision to increase the rent on their property. And I know we don't have a lot of say in terms of that's a provincial issue. So something I wouldn't mind looking at when we get to UBCM resolutions later, that sort of thing regarding rents, rental, the ability to raise rent. It's geared to the tenant, and I think it should be geared to the property. Personally, that's what I think. On another note, in terms of our next steps, are we looking at the possibility of partnerships with landlords to reduce their taxes if they agree to go into a housing agreement to rent a particular property or a suite at a reduced rate or a rate that would be considered affordable?
I'll only speak to the survey results, and I'll leave it to Mr. Lindsay or Ms. Pulsing to speak to next steps. But in terms of the survey results, that is a comment that came up from a number of the landlords. They had we asked the question, what can the city do to support renters and landlords? And we asked that question to the landlords in particular. And yeah, certainly tax reductions, utility reductions, that sort of thing for guaranteed rental housing did come up. We're early on in the process in terms of the 2 housing policies I spoke to. Whether those will speak to it or not, I can't say. And whether we spoke to in other policies, I'm not aware of any current policies that speak to that, so I don't know.
And just one little thing, was it ever brought up with landlords about the possibility of having the landlords required to have business licenses? I know we're doing that for Airbnb, or looking at that, but was that ever brought up as a conversation piece?
that didn't come up in the survey results, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Was there any conversation with developers as to why they're not building, the 2 to 3 bedrooms or some of the accessibilities?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor Armstrong, not in this particular survey. This survey was directed at landlords in particular and renters, so nothing came up regarding development. I believe there was some conversation through the affordable housing strategy on that and some of the other work that was done. I don't know if
through the mayor to Councillor Armstrong, this is something I would see as conversations and engagement through the development of the family-friendly housing policy, that would actively involve those who are in the business of constructing or renovating multifamily units.
Yeah, I just think because we've had so many being built, but most of them are 1 bedrooms or studios, so something I've always liked to see is 2 and 3 bedrooms. Thank you.
Anything further, Council? Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Ms. Bhopal Singh, appreciate the time tonight. The next item is school site acquisition charges. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm going to just give a minute for staff to change over here, but I'm going to introduce Claire Negrin. Ms. Negrin is our manager of subdivision, and she is one of the newest members of our development services team, but she's actually been with the city for over a year. We just have not, with COVID and the pandemic, not had an opportunity to have her with us and introduce her to council. So happy to have her here this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Negrin to introduce this next item on the school site acquisition charge. She's drafted the report, and I'll let her walk through it with you.
Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. The report in front of you is for information, to let you know that the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, School District 68, is undergoing the formal process of establishing a school site acquisition charge bylaw. That bylaw would be adopted by the Board of Education, or the school board, and it would establish a fee on all new development of 4 units or more. That would be collected by the city, actually, either at subdivision or building permit stage. Part of the process is formal consultation with the city. We have started conversations with the school district on the terms of the school site acquisition charge bylaw. That includes the land that they require, the number of students, the amount of development that is expected to happen over the next 10 years. The school district is hoping to have this bylaw established by the fall. So the next step that you would see come forward is a resolution from the school board with the terms that have been established through consultation with staff. Once that resolution comes to council, you would have 60 days to respond, whether in favor or not. Our hope is that when you see those terms, we have, as staff, have worked with the school district to find terms that would be acceptable to council. At the same time, or shortly thereafter, staff would also bring forward a bylaw under the Local Government Act. School site acquisition charge comes forward or is charged for any development of 4 units or more, but the local government, the city could actually establish a bylaw of our own that would see that charge occur for any development of 2 units or more. The school district does speak to that in their letter, and staff think that due to administrative consistency, the establishment of such a bylaw would be beneficial. So you would also see that come forward in the fall as well. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Ms. Negrin, thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. through to Ms. Negrin. The letter that we received from the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, they state in paragraph number 3, that at this time they're only seeking SSACs in the city and likely the district of Lancefield. And I wonder if you've had any indication from them that they are actually going to seek it in other areas where there are students using the schools, either within the city or in the outlying areas, like the regional district.
Try it again.
Or areas like Cedar and Gabriola. So, thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Turley. The bylaw that the school district is looking at establishing would only apply within the city of Nanaimo and the district of Lanceville. And that would be for all of those catchment areas. So not those in Ladysmith or Nanoose.
Yeah, I understand that, but there is the catchment area, part of Cedar, students do come to schools within the city of Nanaimo. And likewise, I think it's Ms. Young's, her area, C, I guess it is it? I can't remember. Yeah, C. Those are the areas I have some concern about. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Turley. Actually, I think those would be terms that we would discuss with the school district between now and September.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Worship. Through you, welcome. And the question that I have is, first of all, I think this is awesome. I'm really glad they're pursuing it. But with respect to strata units, those would contribute into this function, correct? I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yes, Your Worship, to Councillor Brown, that is correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
I just had a question. Why did you go from 4 down to 2? Was there a rationale for that?
Oh, yes, Your Worship, to Councillor Armstrong. The school district would like to see that occur because there's quite a bit of infill that would certainly impact them. For the city ourselves, a school site acquisition charge would be collected at the same time as a development cost charge. And our development cost charges are also collected for all development of 2 units or more. So it would be, beneficial.
Great, thank you. I too am excited to see this. I think it makes sense.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. You may or may not be able to answer these questions. I'm fine with it, and I understand the concept. But we have different size units. So the theory I'm guessing behind here is if you build 2 or more units and there are going to be kids coming in and they're going to need to go to school, many of the units that we build are micro units or 1-bedroom apartments, which I'm going to probably guess are not going to be having school-aged children in them. But yet we're still collecting this thing. And so is that just, it's just going to be a blanket, whatever units you build, you're going to get dinged between $600 and $1,000. Ideally, that would encourage larger units, but I don't think it's much of a price point to make a difference. And so I'm just curious as why, because of that, why are people paying this particular charge when it's obvious that children won't be in that unit? And the second part is, why are we not charging also the DCCs on industrial and commercial places which attract employees which typically have children?
Yes, Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner. To your first question, the legislation and the school site acquisition charge regulation set out the density and the factor, and by factor I mean number of children per unit, that goes into the calculation. In terms of things like micro units, as well as things like nonprofit housing, some of those types of developments are exempt from a school site acquisition charge. Micro units, I don't know for sure, but that can be part of the conversation that we have with the school district. The second part of your question, and I may need to follow up with council afterwards, or ask Mr. Lindsay to do so. I believe that the legislation does actually allow us to charge DCCs and as well as school site acquisition charges on commercial and industrial development, and that would be through the same bylaw where we would bring forward costs for 2 units or more, and that would be, through, the research and the development of that bylaw.
If no further questions, Ms. Negrin, thank you. Hope you enjoyed yourself tonight.
Thank you, I did.
Certainly what you had to say was very interesting. The next is curbside recycling contamination. Mr. Sims, I suspect you're going to introduce Mr. Dallaran.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, as you can see, Mr. Dallaran's here to present the report, but the intent really is to provide council in a public forum with a story, some information on a story that you've started to see in the media, which is curbside recycling contamination is escalating, and we're not the only culprit here, but this is our story.
Mr. Dallaran, good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, and ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I want to express my feeling. It's been the third or fourth time I'm here, and every time I'm here, I feel very well. I just want to pass that, and I couldn't figure it out at the beginning what this was, then I realized it's all about the people around me. Thank you for who you are. And with that, I'm going to start talking about the report. The purpose of this report is to provide council with an update on the residential curbside recycling contamination, and also Recycling BC requirements and expectations for developing a contamination remediation plan. The Extended Producer Responsibility Programs, or EPRPs, are regulated through the recycling regulation within the Environmental Management Act, and the EPRP requires businesses that supply designated materials to be responsible for the cost of collecting, sorting, and recycling these materials. Recycle BC is responsible for residential packaging and paper recycling in BC, and as part of the residential waste collection services, the City of Nanaimo provides curbside recycling collection, or Blue Card, on behalf of Recycle BC. Contamination is a major obstacle in the recycling process and occurs when non-recyclable materials are introduced into the recycling carts. The target contamination rate in the contract between the city and Recycle BC is set to 3% or less, and the Recycle BC performs quarterly audits to measure the contamination rate. And to ensure we have a good control on the contamination, city staff continuously monitor curbside contamination rates since the inception of the automated collection program through an outreach public education program, including targeted hands-out, news release, online advertising, and in-person conversation. Despite these efforts, Recycle BC analysis shows that the contamination rate has been above the target rate and has increased in the past 2 years. Similar increase in contamination are present in other municipalities when transitioning from manual collection to automated collection programs as well. On May 28 this year, Recycle BC requested the City of Nanaimo to develop and submit a formal contamination remediation plan for the curbside recycling program. The plan is to outline actions and procedure to be implemented for the purpose of contamination reduction in order to maintain compliance with the program requirements. Primary point of concern are high level of non-acceptable materials found in CRP. The last quarter of 2020 shows that our average was above 8%. And the high level of incompatible material, specifically film plastics and other flexible plastics. Due to some changes in our staffing, we discussed with Recycle BC and agreed to put the deadline and move it from July 23rd to August 27th for the contamination remediation plan submittal. And City staff will develop the contamination remediation plans as outlined by Recycle BC. The plan will include promotion and education, monitoring, training, enforcement, and tracking. And I would like to present some statistics what the staff has done since the beginning of our new program as in 2021. Out of total almost 780,000 collection that has occurred in the first 5 months of this year, which is about 10 collection cycle. We have about 34,700 contamination exceptions, which is almost 4.5% of the cards that we collect. Our operators, they tag them as there is contamination material in them. And more than 30,000 how to start recycling, which is the card that we developed, and we have it available online, but also we mail out. We have mailed out those to the residents that we have observed contamination as well. We have recently has changed our exception reports and exception identification tags to enhance and have more targeted contamination control by our operators. Also, there has been a new upgrade in our software that we use in our onboard computing in our trucks that allow us to have more very targeted contamination control tags, which we are going to start using it as this new upgrade just came into force earlier last week. And by then I am open to and happy to answer any questions in regards to contamination in our recycling programs.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you, Mr. Dallaran. Welcome back, and appreciate the report and the work that you do. When I read over the report, I wondered, and maybe you can tell me if I'm off the mark or not, I wondered if, to some extent, we're the victim of our own success in that people, I think, are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to put things into recycling bins rather than garbage bins. But in so doing, they're putting some things in which are not cleaned properly or should not be in there in the first place. And I know you've highlighted in your report that education is the first step to try and remedy that. But would you agree that you feel that this is sort of for the most part, an honest mistake? I know you can't generalize or say for sure, but that's how it struck me. I know in our household, we rinse out and try to clean hard plastic food containers, and then we put them in recycling. But if we weren't careful enough rinsing or cleaning them, I suppose that could add to the contamination. That's the type of thing that I'm sensing that is part of the problem here, and only education is going to solve that. Any comment?
In general, recycling is not an easy and clear-cut task. There are two categories of challenges. One is the curbside recycling materials that's collected from household by our program, which we provide at our curbside program. The other part is the depot recycling. These on its own has some confusion. The details of this audit that has been done shows that some of this contamination is not actually contamination, it's just misrecycling. For example, some materials that's supposed to be taken to depots are put in our blue cars, and that's one kind of the contamination that is there. The other part is that material goes to our recycling that are not recyclable as well. But as you mentioned, this is a general, I think, a challenge for almost all municipalities. I am not aware of any municipality meeting those targets, but I know some municipalities contamination is well above even 18-20%. And of course, they are all working to reduce that as well. But in general, automation programs, automated collection programs, has higher contamination rates because in the manual system, collectors, they can open the cans, check them visually before they lift them. But in the automated program, we lift them first, and as they dumped into the hopper, our operator monitors those through the cameras, and at that point, they tag them, but they have already collected most of the cases. one thing that we have started to the process earlier this year was to monitor the contamination, and if it reaches the 3 times, we have asked our operator to get out of the truck, check them on the next collection. And we have created some tags that we are installing on the top of the cards, if that is the case.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Armstrong.
Just a question on the food contamination, because we have this discussion in my neighborhood quite a bit. How much is too much, or does it have to be perfectly clean? Because I know for me, I have to put mine into the dishwasher, which then is more water, et cetera. So a lot of people don't feel that should be happening.
To your worship, it is almost a gray area that sometimes we consume energy to do recycling. The reality is, and it's very scientific based, and it's hard to measure fact that we, up to a certain point, as we take these activities and actions, we produce less pollution due to use of energy to offset what we recover. But if we pass through that certain threshold, we are actually creating more pollution, and we are harming the environment to reach to that high level and high percentage of recycling. While we are trying our best to reach that target of 3%, when it comes to food contamination, it's just what we recommend to our residents, just to do as best, rinse it once, don't need to put it in the washer, because that creates another challenge, and as well as it uses more energy than just rinsing it and putting it in the container.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to our staff here, which I thank you very much for the report. A long time ago, when we talked about the curbside, and when we were talking about actually single-use bags and that bylaw, we were told that we couldn't regulate the plastic bags unless it was something to do with our waste stream. And we couldn't say it was for environmental, if I'm not correct. So now we have a situation where product is in our waste stream, which is causing our problems. Does that give us the go-ahead to look at regulating some of these products more than we're doing now?
To your worship, yes, we are waiting to see what the federal government is going to do. As they announced, they are going to introduce a new bans on some materials by end of this year. If we wait, and we suggest that we should wait to see what they are going to introduce, and based on what they cover, we should focus on by doing some more audit ourselves, and then based on what we find, we should target on the next materials that are not covered by federal government.
Okay, and if I may, you mentioned some products are ending up in our blue bins that are supposed to be in our depots. Unless you know where a depot is, there seems to be some sort of confusion, and even in my household, I'm not, like, I just throw glass in the garbage, because I was told a long time ago that's where it's fine. I've also lived in some provinces where glass gets collected on the side of the road in a blue box. Yeah. So do we need to actually bite the bullet and spend more labor with eyes on people sorting the stuff that comes out of our blue bins? I mean, this is probably a rather larger conversation, but I think from an environmental point of view, we probably need to look at better ways, and if every time we have this conversation we say, well, it's too expensive, I don't think that's an argument anymore, right? Eventually, we're all going to have to bite the bullet and actually do proper recycling. And to me, that means you can pretty well put what you want in the blue bin, and we'll sort it out at the other end. It's going to cost more because we're using labor, but I think you would get a better product at the end, because you can't rely on people to do it properly at the beginning.
Your Worship, just through Councillor Bonner makes some really excellent points. I think one of the discussions that occurs in my own household is wish cycling, a term that Ms. Davis coined very early on, and that's where I think something should be recyclable, like plastic bags or glass, but it really isn't. So the city is really under this agreement with Recycle BC to collect certain types of consumer products, not including plastic bags, not including glass. So you'd almost have to create another bin for those non-standard items. We're just a delivery service from the consumer back to Recycle BC in this instance. That it shifts the burden of cost to the producer. That's the benefit of this, but it doesn't solve that larger picture problem of, some of the things that we all believe should be recycling, glass especially, aren't. That's not part of the mandate.
Councillor Kesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. The contamination, especially after automated services provided, the contamination going up is definitely something that's been observed across the board in other jurisdictions. And this idea of commingled recycling and how it's being recycled, and actually the level of efficacy once it gets to the depots that are separating it is in question as well. And Councillor Bonner does raise some interesting questions that have much larger implications. But I do think what we are seeing is a strong desire for the community to recycle, and that's why we're seeing plastic bags and all these things being put into with the recycling. And there's a lot of wish cycling that is going on, because I think if my experience, there is a lot of guilt when the product goes into the garbage bin, and people are trying to avoid that. So I think it's important that we're closely monitoring this. Getting that education out for people to understand about having to wash out their containers, where the materials go, whether it's in our curbside recycling or it goes to the depots, getting information out about where the depots are, working closely with the regional district on that communication plan. And I think as we go forward, being really honest of the direction where recycling is going, and at some point sort of having a bit of a review and looking at other strategies in case we're not seeing the numbers go in the direction that we want. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Mr. Delleran, thank you very much. Appreciate the report tonight.
Thank you.
And the next item is Property Maintenance Amendment Bylaw. Third reading is amended. Ms. Gurry. And before you start, I just want to pay tribute to Councillor Armstrong for her eagle eye in raising this matter. Her legal beagle eye.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Karen Robertson, and I was going to thank Councillor Armstrong as well, and thank Ms. Robertson for her patience this evening. We're here finally, so I'll turn it over to you.
Just about to meet
Ms.
the 9
Robertson,
o'clock
welcome.
wire. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So on June 21st, I presented the property maintenance bylaw amendment to Council with the intent of clarifying the language associated with graffiti removal, and it also to update the violations and penalty provisions within the bylaw. And staff also put forward a more simplified definition for graffiti as it was recommended by the city solicitor. So during the meeting, Councillor Armstrong noted that the new wording, which defined graffiti as markings made on any structure, building, thing, or property without the prior written authorization of the property owner, had the potential to conflict with Section 4.5, which states that an owner must not cause or permit graffiti to accumulate or remain on a fence, surface, or structure which is visible from the adjacent property or public place. So staff wanted an opportunity to review this in a little bit more detail, and if necessary, to come back with a revised definition, which is why I'm here tonight. The initial definition, which included the approval of the property owner, it was sort of targeted towards the mischief graffiti. And it also avoided having the city become the pre-approved arbiter to determine what was in good taste or not. However, as Councillor Armstrong noted, she is correct in that there is a potential for conflict, and in particular, should an owner claim that they gave prior written confirmation to avoid the charges associated with cleaning up their property. So to rectify this, a new definition is before Council that will remove reference to approval by the property owner and also the removal of prior written. This then keeps the authorization with the city and eliminates the conflict with Section 4.5, and it also closes any potential loopholes. Now, to avoid any potential challenges by removing property owner out, where it becomes the city's determination of graffiti, decisions will need to be channeled through one staff member, and this coupled with good notes and photos, keeping those good notes should meet the test for the standards of reasonableness should it end up going to a judicial review. And so should council be supportive of the revised definition of graffiti, it would require council rescind third reading of the bylaw and then pass third reading as amended as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. I don't see any questions. I'm going to ask Councillor Armstrong to make the motion.
That council rescind third reading of property maintenance and standards amendment bylaw 2021 number decimal 7242.01, and that council give third reading as amended to property maintenance and standards amendment 2021 number decimal 724.01 to include the revised edition for graffiti.
Your Worship, so could we just do those seriatim? So the first motion to rescind third reading, if there could be a seconder and then a motion on that?
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Bonner, did you wish?
It would actually be on the next one, my
All right.
question is.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. When I look at the changes, and I'm not one for wordsmithing bylaws, I understand my role here. Does the change make it so that property owners need to get permission to put up anything on their walls? And I'm playing devil's advocate again here. Somebody has a kid who wants to become an artist and decides that they're going to let their kid paint something on the side of their building. And it's a great big S with a whole bunch, looks really cool, you know, all that funky stuff. And do they need to now get permission from the city of Nanaimo to be able to do that?
Well, it would be complaint driven, but yes, I suppose it would, depending on what it is. And again, we have to figure out what is the mischief graffiti versus artwork. And so this is where the test of reasonableness comes in. Perhaps having some appealing artwork on your building would not be offensive and would not raise anybody's dander at all. But if it becomes offensive, then that's when we get into what's the standard of reasonableness. And by having that one individual, which would be the manager of bylaw enforcement, he would be the person who would make that determination.
Okay, that was my second part, is how does we give it that bylaw authority to that person to decide art? So if somebody has their kid put something on the side of the wall of their commercial place, and nobody complains about it, it can stay. Someone doesn't particularly like it, they will complain to bylaws, and then bylaws will then decide whether or not it has to
As to
stay or
whether it
go.
can stay or whether it needs to be removed.
And what sort of protection does the landowner or the person who owns the building have to either appeal it or go along those lines?
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bonner. With any decision of staff, there is always the opportunity to appeal that decision to council. So there would be an opportunity or a method, a process available to that owner to, if the manager of bylaws determined artwork was graffiti and the owner or artist disagreed, there would be that appeal process available to that person to come to council.
Councillor Armstrong? Did you have?
Yeah, I guess my concern still remains the fact that we're putting all this onus on cleanup to people that didn't do this in the first place. And I just go look, and I look back to Archie Johnson again, where like they were spending tens of thousands of dollars a year for cleanup. And I just think that's grossly unfair that they're responsible for something that they had no control over. So for me, I just can't support this without some type of support or something for the owners of the properties, because it's just becoming, they remove it one day and the next day it's back, and it's just so cost prohibitive, so I just can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had the motion, not yet. We need to, we're going to do it.
Yes, I just do need it seconded. Councillor Armstrong did move that out. Yeah.
Exactly. Councillor Bonner, seconds. Any discussion on the second motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Armstrong and Turley. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have no bylaws, Ms. Gurry. We have no notices of motion. We have no other business. We're coming, gentlemen, in order. Question period. Thank you very much. Mr. Manners. 12E Renters and Landlord Survey. Good evening. Long time no see.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to be back. In the discussion about renters, landlords, and their experience in survey, I found out that some things were missing, and I'd like Council to consider them in any future questions that they might have towards renters, and that is one of the biggest problems that we have is parking. There was no questions asking what renters thought of their parking, if there was sufficient. I am a renter myself. The complex that I'm in, we have very satisfactory parking. But I know there are a lot in this community that do not have parking within 300 meters of their residence. They have a park within 300 meters, but they don't have any parking. And I'd like to ask Council what they think of asking Reimagine Nanaimo to go further into asking people about parking in their community.
I'm tempted to let Councillor Armstrong answer that question.
The issue with parking has always been a big concern for me. And I think as we move over to EV vehicles, it's going to be even worse because we don't have the facilities to charge on the streets, and that's where a lot of people charge, and there's a lot of issues with that. That's one of the most complaints I get is about the lack of parking. We saw the seniors facility go in on Prideaux Street there with 13 parking spaces for 65 units, and they have no place to park and they can't walk, and there's all sorts of issues with it. So there's a lot of issues for me with that, and I personally think it would be a great thing to put in there. Do you think there should be adequate parking for all new developments? That's a huge issue for me.
Mr. Manners, thank you. I think you've made a point.
Thank you.
No further questions. Motion for adjournment. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.
Oh, Penny Mitchell already sent her email about our parking variance.